This is a second video about databases, and this one's just thinking a little bit about how we can identify redundant data in a table, i.e. data that's used lots of times or repeated when we don't need to, and removing it from that table and perhaps putting it into a second table that we can link together. So again, we've just got some ideas on the right-hand side of definitions. So you might have heard the word entity talked about. So an entity is just something that's from the real world that we can identify as worth representing in a data system. So if you were someone designing a database, you might want to try and identify the entities that you wanted to represent. So cars in a garage database or customers would definitely be entities that would be useful in a database. In this case, on the table that we've got here, we have got students and tutors in this table. We've also got some information about tutor groups and where the students live, etc. So we said before that a table, sometimes called a relation, it's a data that's organized into a structure. We talked about that in a previous video about the way that we could organize the rows as records and the columns as fields. And we also talked before about the primary key that's got a unique property, so it identifies a single record in the table. You can't have a duplicate primary key. So you can have a composite primary key, which is a primary key that's made up of more than one field. So if you've got a database where it's not possible to identify uniquely all the records by just using one key, you could use a combination of two keys to do that, and that's called a composite primary key. We talked very briefly before about the idea of linking tables together, and we can link tables together with a foreign key, and we'll look at that in this video. So if we look at this database table that we've got here, then we've got first name, surname, house number, town, postcode, tutor group, tutor name, year group, and room. So this is a database obviously for a set of students, and it shows their tutors and where their tutor group room is and what year group they're in and things like that. So there's some duplication of the data because the tutor group information about each student gets repeated for every student. So we can see that in this case, there are several tutors that are repeated in here, and their year group and their room is repeated every time in this table, when perhaps that doesn't need to be done. Perhaps we could link that to an outside table where we've just got one copy of each tutor and which year group they teach, etc. So we're going to have a look at how we might do that on this video. So if we just move down a little, and perhaps we'll move that up there a little. So we could identify two entities. So we could have a student entity and a tutor group entity. So think about those entities as tables. So we could have a student table and a tutor group table. So if we take all of the information about tutor groups out of the student table and put it in its own table, it might look something like this. So we have a tutor group with an initial. So the initials are the primary key that's identifying that tutor group. We've got the name of the tutor, the year group they teach, and the room that that tutor group happens in. So all of those are in a separate table now. And we've still got in this table first name, surname, house name, etc. We've added an ID field, which is the primary key that's identifying each student with an ID. In the real world, each student might have a unique learner number. We could use the unique learner number for that in order to do the primary key, but in this case, we've just used an ID number, which is just a simple number. So we've now changed the structure of the database so that I'm not repeating all of the data about tutor groups. So in this case, tutor group here in the table for students is called a foreign key, and it's linked to this one like this. So we link From this end, we link to the tutor group field in the student database, and that's the foreign key. So there's the foreign key, and in here it's a primary key. So we've now linked them together, and if I want to find out all of the information, all of the tutees that each tutor has, then I can still look that up. I can look it up because I've got the foreign key field here. And indeed, that links through to this table, and we'll look at how to link those up and how to extract that data using SQL in a future video. So we've got this idea of referential integrity. So that's a big word that just means that I can't add a tutor to the tutor group field here. I can't add one here unless it already exists in the tutor table, because there's a primary key here and it won't let me add something if it's not already linked. Now that's a really useful thing to be able to do, because it means I can't put an erroneous tutor in here. It can't be done, which is really handy, because that means I can't make a mistake by putting the wrong tutor initials in. Well, I can still put the wrong tutor initials in, but they would have to be an actual tutor that's in the table. So it helps to keep the data integrated, as we call it, which is why it's called referential integrity. So this has been just looking at the way of removing some data from one table, placing it into another table, and then linking them up with the foreign key mechanism. This is called the foreign key mechanism, that we put a foreign key in one table and we match it to the primary key, usually in another table. So referential integrity and identifying two entities.